I don't even know why he took me. I'm nobody special, just a typical high school kid. But I'll never forget the night that van pulled up alongside me as I walked home from a friend's house. It was dumb to be out alone that late, but it was only a few blocks. I figured I'd be fine. When the van doors slid open and 3 guys jumped out in ski masks, it took my brain a second to even process what was happening. By then, it was too late. They grabbed me and shoved me into the back of the van, tying my wrists and ankles. One guy yanked my beanie hat down over my eyes so I couldn't see. The doors slammed shut and I felt the van taking off. Blind and bound. I freaked out, screaming and thrashing around. A rag got stuffed in my mouth to shut me up. The van drove for what must have been over an hour before stopping. I got dragged out and into a building, I think. They tied me to a chair and finally ripped the hat off my eyes. I found myself in a windowless concrete room lit by a single bulb. It looked like an abandoned warehouse or bunker. 2 of the guys from the van stood silently in the corner, wearing skeleton masks. A metal door creaked open, and in walked the man in charge. I could tell by the way the other 2 straightened up when he entered. He smiled coldly at me and introduced himself as Elias. I demanded to know why they'd taken me, but he just laughed. Over the next few days, Elias visited me regularly in that cold, empty room. He never explained his motives or what he planned to do. He just talked calmly about random stuff or forced me to play bizarre mind games and trivia quizzes. It was totally nuts. The masked henchman would show up periodically to untie me, so I could eat disgusting soup and use a rusty bucket in the corner. Other than that, they never spoke or reacted to anything, even my pleas for mercy and freedom. Just when I'd given up all hope, a miracle happened. One night, I heard shouting and chaos outside the room. Suddenly, the door busted open and cops swarmed in, guns raised. They'd somehow tracked the kidnappers to their hideout. Maybe followed the van. As they untied me, an officer gently explained that Elias was a deranged schizophrenic who'd kidnapped teens before, believing voices told him to. The other 2 men were his gullible brothers just going along with it. They'd all be locked up for good now. I barely slept that first night home, waking up gasping from nightmares where I was back in that empty room with the madman and his masked brothers. Months of therapy eventually helped me move on from the trauma, but I'll never walk anywhere alone again, especially not at night. There are some real psychos out there who snatch innocent people for insane reasons. Only they understand. They hide away in the shadows of abandoned places, acting out twisted fantasies. I learned the hard way that monsters could be lurking down any dark street, waiting for the right moment to steal you away into the unknown. A week at a lake house. It was supposed to be a peaceful family getaway. Just me, my husband Jack, and our 2 kids enjoying quality time together. We'd swim, fish, play board games, and disconnect from the stress of daily life. But our idyllic retreat quickly took a terrifying turn. The first few days were everything we hoped for. The weather was perfect as the kids splashed around the private dock and took the little motorboat out for spins. In the evenings, we barbecued dinner, then roasted marshmallows under the stars. It felt good to be together away from the hustle and grind back home. No distractions, just laughter and simple joy. I remember thinking I should bottle up these memories to hold on to when times got tough again. But then, the screams started. It was during a late-night thunderstorm that we first heard the faint cries coming from the woods behind the house. At first, we assumed it was an animal in distress, but the wailing persisted for hours, almost sounding like a person yelling out in pain. Jack went out on the deck to investigation, but the downpour drowned out the sounds. The next morning, the kids asked about the spooky noises they heard in the night. We waved it off as a bobcat or coyote, but things only got more unsettling. The next evening, while having dinner on the back patio, we heard definite angry shouting coming from deep in the forest. Jack hurried down to the tree line, demanding whoever was trespassing to show themselves. Only silence followed. That night, none of us could sleep, listening anxiously for sounds over the chirp of crickets. The kids huddled close to me in bed, frightened by the phantom cries in the night. We decided come morning, we'd pack up and leave this place. But when we rose the next day, our SUV was missing from the dirt driveway. No tire tracks or signs of broken glass. It had just vanished. With no cell service, this deep in the woods, we were stranded. As Jack hiked down the road seeking help, the cries rang out again from the shadows of the trees, only they were no longer indistinct. This time, the shrill, pleading voice was distinctly yelling, "Help me," over and over. I gathered the terrified kids inside and locked all the doors and windows. Peering outside, I could see movement in the tree line, a shape lumbering between the trunks and underbrush. Something was out there, but it didn't seem human. Jack returned hours later, still having found no main road or neighbors. But he brought chilling news from a store owner in a rural town miles away. Apparently, hikers had been disappearing in these woods for decades. Some claimed Bigfoot himself was behind the vanishings. Surely, just an unsettling myth. With no way out, we had no choice but to hunker down and wait another night, keeping vigilant watch for whatever sinister presence lurked beyond the tree line. As soon as daylight broke, we'd make another attempt to find help. We just prayed we would all live to see the sunrise. The next day's dawn never came for my husband, though. At some point, in the grim night, Jack's agonized screams jolted us awake. By the time I rushed outside to the back deck, he was gone. Only his slippers and a trail of blood leading into the dense forest remained. The local authorities never found a single trace of Jack during their investigation of the area. The kids and I left that lake house traumatized, mourning the man we loved. We still don't know for sure what happened to him out there in those woods, but it seems some dark entity roams that isolated forest, lying in wait for those unfortunate enough to stumble unknowingly into its domain. They say time soothes all wounds, but there are some scars too deep to ever fully heal. The shadowy shapes that haunt your nightmares, stealing life and hope. The dangers lurking right at the edges of paradise, hungry and untamed. It was just supposed to be a normal Thursday night. I had gone to the grocery store to pick up a few things for dinner, then stopped at the gas station on my way home. As I was pumping gas into my car, a large white van pulled up on the other side of the pump. I didn't think much of it at first, just another customer getting gas. But as I finished filling up and went to get back in my car, the van's side door slid open and two men jumped out, grabbing me from behind. One of them clamped a gloved hand over my mouth before I could even scream, while the other wrenched my arms behind my back. I struggled with all my might, stomping on their feet and trying to wriggle out of their grip, but they were too strong. They shoved me into the back of the van and slammed the door shut. Everything happened so fast I felt completely disoriented, like this must be some kind of nightmare. As the van sped off, I could hear the two men talking in low voices up front. Drive normal. Don't speed. We don't want to get pulled over. I was still in shock, part of me hoping this was just a case of mistaken identity, and they'd realize they had the wrong person. But when one of them called back to ask if I was comfortable and chuckled at my muffled cries, I knew this was no accident. My mind was racing, heart pounding in my chest as I tried to get my bearings. I was lying on the floor in the back of the van, my hands and feet now bound with rope. It was mostly empty, aside from some boxes and blankets. There were no windows or way to see where we were headed. I could only feel the bumps and turns as we drove farther from the gas station. From safety, from anyone who could help me. The terror was paralyzing. After what seemed like an eternity, the van finally rolled to a stop. The engine cut off, and the two men opened the side door again, grabbing me under the arms. I tried pleading with them to let me go, but they ignored my cries as they dragged me out of the van. I could see now we were in a dark alley between some rundown warehouses. It was nighttime and eerily quiet. They forced me through a side door into one of the warehouses. The smell of mildew and oil, heavy in the air. They led me down a dim corridor to a small windowless room with a dingy mattress on the floor. After removing the rope binding my wrists and ankles, they pushed me down onto the mattress and slammed the door shut. I heard a lock click into place. I was trapped. Alone in that tiny room, the panic really started to set in. Why had they taken me? What did they want? Were they going to kill me? I thought about my family. Wondering if they had realized yet that something was wrong. Would I ever see them again? Exhausted from the adrenaline crash, I eventually cried myself to sleep on that filthy mattress. The next day, the two men returned to ask if I was ready to cooperate. They wanted access to my bank accounts, insisting I give them my PIN numbers and online account passwords. I refused. This went on for days, them alternating between threats and false promises that they'd let me go if I just gave them what they wanted. They kept me weak and disoriented, providing only minimal food and water. But I couldn't bring myself to betray my family's trust, no matter how dire my situation became. I lost all track of time in that windowless room. My only indication that days were passing was when the men would come to pressure me again. I became increasingly desperate, wondering if I would waste away in that miserable warehouse. But I clung to the hope that help would come before it was too late. Surely someone had noticed I was missing by now. My family must be looking for me, right? The police had to be searching. I just needed to hold on a little longer, stay strong. I wouldn't let these monsters break me. Somehow, I endured the fear and isolation, never knowing if each new day would be my last. Until finally, miraculously, I heard shouting and loud bangs from outside the room. Heavy footsteps came pounding down the corridor, and then the door burst open. Blinding light flooded in as a gruff voice yelled, "Police! Get down on the ground." My nightmare was over. I was finally safe.